Hey guys, it's Nathan Raleigh, and I want to get right into what we're expecting for the CPI April release. This is happening on May 11th at 8:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. I'm Central Time Zone, so I'll be expecting it at 7:30 in the morning. And this is something that is really big for our markets, this crazy market we've been in. This is something y'all should be looking at, and I want to help y'all understand what are two key factors that we need to be looking at whenever this releases. So let's get right into that. Right here is Trading Economics US inflation rate. So they've been monitoring US inflation. They put it in this helpful graph for us, and we can see where inflation started back in mid 2021 in April right here, about 4.2% annualized, and it's increased since then. A slight dip whenever the Fed thought that we were having a transitory inflation market, but ever since October, we've seen a steep increase in US inflation, all the way up until last release, which was March 2022, 8.5%. It's a very high inflation rate. We haven't seen these numbers since the 1980s, and the Fed is trying to determine how they can combat these higher inflations. So, right here you can see that the consensus, this is Wall Street's number, this is a Wall Street's expectation for inflation. They assumed last month in March that 8.4% was going to be the released inflation rate. However, we had a slight miss. We had an 8.5% actual inflation reported in the CPI. So this is what the first thing I want y'all to be looking at. This 8.1%. This is noticeably lower than last month's 8.5%. Since this number is a little lower, that could indicate that we're at a peak. We're at a peak, and we've peaked in March. So this 8.1%, I want y'all to be noticing if we're getting anything lower or higher than this inflation rate. If we're hitting the 7.8s, 7.9s, even 8 flat, that's great news for this market. That means most likely inflation peaked in March or moving down, and the Federal Reserve does not need to continue increasing the federal fund rate at insane levels. But if we see anything around the 8.3s, 8.4s, or even 8.5s, that'd be terrifying for this market. That means inflation maybe isn't increasing, but it's stagnating. It's staying up there where it's at. And that might mean that the Fed needs to combat stagflation and rake up the federal funds rate, which could lead the economy into a recession. So that's the first thing we're looking for, that headline inflation. You can find that number right here in this first paragraph. You see this is March, so 8.5% was the report. That's annualized, of course. So one other thing, the second thing I want y'all to be looking at is right here, excuse me, in this core index. So the core index is the CPI release minus food and energy. Food and energy are often seen as volatile markets. Ever since the Russia-Ukraine crisis, we've been seeing less food and grain from Ukraine, and obviously less oil from Russia, as we're not importing that anymore. So right here, you can see that the core index minus food and energy, minus that volatility of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, was 0.3% monthly. But we had an expected 0.5%. This last month was a huge indicator, a big deal, probably the only indicator that we might be peaking. We might be on the way down. If Russia-Ukraine didn't happen, we would have been on the way down, is basically what this is saying. So that is the second thing we need to look at. Right here is another page on trading economics. It shows that exact same information, 0.5% expected by Wall Street, 0.3% actual. So the first thing I want y'all to be looking at is the overall inflation rate, 8.1%. Is it higher? Is it lower? Second, core inflation. Is Russia-Ukraine still affecting us? If it's at that 0.3, 0.2, or 0.1% for core inflation, that's amazing news, because that means that our economy is dealing well with inflation, minus volatile markets. So those are the two big things that I want y'all to be looking at for tomorrow's release, tomorrow morning. And right here is the website where you can actually find at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time the release. So I'm going to link this in the description for all of y'all. If y'all enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.